Good morning. This morning I'd like to talk on two paragraphs on this book, Opening the Hand of Thought, page 134, if you have this text. Let me read these two paragraphs. In winter in Japan, all the plants die back, but suddenly when spring comes, many varieties of wildflowers bloom in the field. Each of these flowers is blooming forth the life of spring. From the other side, by the coming of the life we call spring, the violet blooms as a violet, the dandelion as a dandelion, the lotus as a lotus. In the same way, the flower of my life blossoms when I work to make the flower that is the world, people and things I now face blossom. And within the blossoming of the flowers of my life, the flowers of all things come to blossom. Likewise, the flower of your life blossoms when you work to enable the flowers you now face to blossom. And therein blooms the flower of universal life. In this part of this book, he's talking about how our Zazen practice works in our daily lives. And he talks in terms of three minds. Three minds in Japanese is Sanshin. So the name of this temple came from these three minds. And those three minds are Daishin, Rōshin, and Kishin. Dai means big, large, or we translate this as magnanimous mind. And second is Rōshin. Rō means aging or matured. And we translate, I think, in this book as a nurturing mind. Or Dōgen said this is a mind of parents. And third one, Kishin, is joyful mind. And now he is talking about Rōshin as a mind of a matured person or a mind of parent. You know, the big mind is a mind without discrimination. We see, this entire universe is my life without any discrimination. This is how our Zazen practice allows us to see being released from our discriminating mind that make distinction based on our subjective like and dislike, or good and bad, or beneficial or not beneficial, or win and lose. So when he talks about, Dōgen and Uchiyama Rōshi talks about Daishin, this is a Zazen mind. And yet, when we are sitting in the Zendo, that's okay, we see, this self is zero or empty. Then we see the oneness together with all beings, interconnected with all beings. That is how we see our life based on the Zen. But once we stand up and get out of Zendo, this is a kind of dangerous. If we don't make distinction or discrimination, we cannot make any choice. We don't know what is better or what is worse, what is good, what is not good. Then we cannot make choice. So somehow we have to find what is the standard for making that kind of a choice based on the mind or big mind without discrimination. So we have to make discrimination based on the mind without discrimination. How can we such a thing? How such a thing is possible? And this second mind, Rōshin or parental mind or nurturing mind, is making such a distinction or discrimination based on compassion. That is what Dōgen said about the Rōshin in Tenzo Kyokun. And last time I talked about what Dōgen said in Tenzo Kyokun. And what Dōgen said was, we see three treasures of Buddhism, that is Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, as if those three are our children. And I talked about what are three treasures in Dogen's teaching. As a common understanding in Buddhism, three treasures are Buddha, the teacher, and Dharma, Buddha's teaching, and Sangha is a group of people who studied Buddha's teaching and practiced following that teaching. But according to Dōgen, the absolute aspect of three treasures are this entire universe is Buddha. And how things are within this entire network of interdependent origination is Dharma. And all beings within this network are the Sangha. So we need to see this entire universe as our teacher. And we study how all beings are as a Dharma. And we see all beings as Sangha members. And we try to take care of the situation in which all beings are living interconnectedness with compassion, not based on our benefit, our personal benefit or like and dislike. And Dōgen called that is Rōshin or parental mind. And in these two paragraphs, Uchiyama Rōshi talks about how this parental mind works. And he used the analogy of the, each and every plants blooming in the spring, and the spring itself. Spring is universal thing. Now we know one part of the earth is spring, another part is fall, or those 4 seasons are not fixed. But in ancient times, people think, if when spring comes, this entire universe, entire world is spring. So spring refers to the entirety of the network of interdependent origination. And we are, as I always draw, we are part of this network as individual beings. And in the first paragraph I read this morning, we are different. We have different, unique features. So one might be like a dandelion, or the violet, or rose, or different kind of flowers bloom in the spring. When I read these two paragraphs, I found a mistake, translation mistake. That is a name of a flower. The end of this first paragraph, Uchiyama Rōshi says, from the other side, by the coming of the life, we call spring. So spring is this entirety. And the violet blooms as a violet, and the dandelion as a dandelion, and the lotus as a lotus. This lotus is a problem. The violet and dandelion are same kind of, small, tiny flowers. But that lotus is completely different kind of flower. And this is a mistake. And I don't know. I'm one of the translators of this book. And originally I worked with Tom Wright almost 40 years ago, in the early 80s. And probably at the time I just started working on translation. So probably I thought the names of the flower are not so important. They are all beautiful flowers. But yesterday I found this is a really big problem, I think. And what Uchiyama Rōshi wrote in the original text is, if you are Japanese, you know renge. Renge? He wrote in katakana. And lotus is same sound, renge. Ren is lotus and ge is flower. So renge means lotus flowers. So this is really lotus. So this is not complete mistake on the surface as a word. But renge, when renge is mentioned together with violet and dandelion, this renge is completely different plant. So yesterday I checked the dictionaries and I found this plant, the English name of this plant, and the English name of this plant is, I didn't know this English name, so maybe that was reason we simply renge is lotus. Where is it? It said it's a Chinese milk vetch. Do you know this flower? That's good. Probably that was the reason we didn't use this name, because I didn't know this English name, and Tom Wright didn't know what this flower looks like. Please?
Does the lotus flower bloom in the spring?
No.
In Japan, it's in the summer, right?
Yeah, lotus.
Yeah.
So this is really a mistake.
Yeah.
And lotus flower doesn't bloom in the field.
Right.
It in the water, in the pond. So this is a really mistake.
We have vetches, not the Chinese milk vetch, but we have other ones. But most people probably don't know them.
Probably that's why we didn't use this name. But when I read about this renge, usually we call this plant renge as a renge so to make difference between real lotus. Renge so means grass, and this grass blooms in the rice field. This is a tiny short grass with a very pretty purple flower. And one of the name in Chinese of this flower is Shi-un. Shi-un A, and we read this as a renge. Shi means purple, and un is cloud, and A in this case means flower. So in the early spring, when violet and dandelion blooms on the rice field, all over blooms this flower, purple flowers, and it looks like clouds. So this is really important flower, not only as a beauty of the spring, but this plant probably originally from China. Probably this flower was carried from China to Japan together with rice plant. And in the fall, after they harvest rice, they plant this renge or milk vetch on the rice field. And the flower blooms in the early spring. And after flower blooms, then the farmers plow the soil. And so this renge soil become so-called green manure. So it's really important plant for growing rice. And another important thing about this plant, milk vetch, is this plant has a root. This is a kind of how do you pronounce this? F-A-B-A-C-E-A-E. Fabaceae.
It's the bean family.
Yeah, bean family. Bean family is better, easier to me. So bean family, the plant of bean family has some kind of bacteria on their roots. And these bacteria get the nitrogen from the air and make nutrition for the plant. So this bacteria and this plant, milk vetch, are working, support each other. And I didn't know that word until yesterday, but this relation is called symbiosis. And to me, I think, I'm not sure if Uchiyama Rōshi think about this symbiosis or not. When he wrote renge together with violet and dandelion, but this has a, I think, very meaningful plant in this context of Uchiyama Rōshi's discussion. That means when I read about symbiosis, I think symbiosis is one of the four typical relation among the things in the world of living beings. I think One is a relation between, what is the word? I cannot remember anything. Relation between predatory and prey. The food and the animal who eat that food. And competition. And the third is symbiosis. And the fourth is parasite. Those are, in the biology, those are kind of a relation between individual beings within this network. And I think Uchiyama Rōshi and also Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, about within those four kind of relations, symbiosis is important. First two, food and eater, and second, competition are the kind of principle in the secular world. And according to Indian scriptures, it is, I'm not sure it's historically true or not, but as a legend of Shakyamuni Buddha's early life, when he was probably a teenager, he was at the festival for beginning of farming. In Buddha's country, it seems they already grow rice, because Buddha's father's name was Pure Rice Jo King. So probably, Buddha Shakyamuni was seeing how farmers are working, sitting under that tree. And the story said he saw a bird came and eat the worm. And after that, he saw the larger bird came and catch that bird, small bird that ate the worm. And he kind of, what is the word, discussed about how living beings, live together as a predator and prey. Because that was a situation, social situation of India at Buddha's time. Before that, each clan lived independently in a small village, but it became larger and larger kind of community, and it became a kingdom. The king governed the different clans. And Buddha was a prince of one kingdom. But in the history of India at that time, it was a kind of a process that those small kingdoms were united, being conquered by larger kingdom, and become part of that kingdom. Buddha's clan, Shakya clan, was belongs to the larger country named Kosala. And in that Shakyamuni Buddha's time, Kosala and another kingdom, Magadha, were two largest powers. And about 100 years after Shakyamuni, the entire India at that time was completely united by King Ashoka. So if Buddha became the king of his father's kingdom, then sooner or later his kingdom would be conquered by larger power. And even though he might became a good wise king. If he lived in that way, probably we don't remember, even know the name. But it's interesting, when Ashoka became the emperor of his huge empire, he didn't like, that idea, not idea, but that way of life, competition and win or lose. And King Ashoka was a final winner, but in the process of competition or fighting, he saw terrible, things during the war. So when he became the emperor, he took refuge in Buddha's teaching. What Buddha did was he kind of escaped from the world of competition. And what he he found as a Dharma is kind of living peaceful or live peaceful way within this interconnectedness, I think. By seeing, we are not independent beings. Whatever we gain, we lose. Or even like a King Ashoka, he gained everything, entire world, almost entire world. Still, he loses himself as an impermanent being and no self. So that way of life doesn't make sense. I think that was what Buddha found. I think that, so this idea of the relation within this internet network of interdependent origination, how each individual beings, how can I say, live together. Are we the competitor with others, and we become winner or loser? Is that all about our life, human life, or not? And I think Buddha said no. There is another way of life to, to live together peacefully and harmoniously without competition. So in the biology, those four kind of relations among living beings are all there, and we cannot say one is good and another is bad, because all there. But I think Buddha and Uchiyama Rōshi is talking, which is the most healthy kind of healthy way of life, which models is most best way for us human beings. When we see, this world today, I think still main principle within this human world is still competition and win or lose, and how we can use other people as a tool or device to fill my desire. As far as that is a main principle in the human world. Another model found by Buddha has also meaning, because in this principle or in this system, not many people can be winners. If everyone can be winners, there's no meaning to compete. because small number of strong people become winners. That means much more people have to be losers and controlled by the winners. So probably the winners can feel happy, but the rest of the people cannot be happy. And even those people who own, the big part of the wealth in this world, still they cannot live with peace of mind, because all others are competitors. So anytime they can be loser, because all people want to be winner. So, and when we face our death, we feel that kind of life doesn't make sense. No matter how much we achieve or accomplish and gain wealth, we have to give up when we die. Then we find what is the meaning of this, hard competition. So as far as, main part of human world is working with this principle of win and lose, then another possibility, there's no winner and no loser. All beings within this network are working together, supporting each other. That sounds more healthy. So I think the meaning of Buddhist teaching and Buddhist practice will not be lost as far as people are living based on the principle of winning and losing. So in a sense, these two are, working together. After King Ashoka became the emperor and he became Buddhist, in a sense, Buddhist teaching and this idea of win and lose are, in a sense, what is the word? Become the relation of symbiosis. People who don't like this principle can go to, this practice. I think that is fine. Actually, the kings in Buddha's time, those kings in those two, most powerful kingdom, King Bimbisara and King Prasenajit, became Buddha's student. Somehow, even the winners need something to have a peace of mind, something spiritual. That's why Buddha became their teachers, and King Ashoka the same. But somehow, after King Ashoka, somehow Buddhism became a kind of a part of, this system of winners and losers. That can be a problem. I think not only Buddhism, but almost all religions, when become a part of political and economical power, then religion loses healthy spirit, and religion is used as a kind of a device for governing people. When people have some problems with this governing system, then they have some place to live and work live in a different principle. That is what is called Buddha Dharma. So in the history, Buddhism is one of the religions. It's kind of, how can I say, within this symbiotic relation between Dharma and, in Japanese, we call these two as Oho and Buppo. O is king, and Ho is Dharma, and Buppo is Buddha Dharma. Buddha Dharma and Dharma of king, that is political kind of a principle. Especially in Chinese and Japanese Buddhism, Buddha Dharma or Buddhist Sangha is always under control of the political power. I think that is a problem. No, I think not only Buddhism, but almost all religions become, I'm sorry to say to use such a word, become like a parasite of the political power, political and economical power. Of course, there are many, exceptions, but now in this country, in the United States, we don't have any, not any, but we are not supported by political power. That's why we don't have much power. Buddhism is still small, but I think this is a healthy condition. If Buddhism becomes a part of political system, then we lose the genuine spirit of being peaceful. Well, what I'm talking, I forget. Anyway, so this milk vetch, I return. I think is kind of important. What this plant shows us is important. Of course, lotus is important in Buddhism, but in this context, I think milk vetch has more meaningful. So I hope we have a chance to make this change next time when this is revised. So, what Uchiyama Rōshi is, I return to this paragraph, is talking about is how we can, when we have a big mind, that is mind beyond discrimination based on subjective like and dislike, or whether it's beneficial to me or not. That is what I always said, 1 equals 0 equals infinity. This seeing 1 equals infinity is a big mind, or magnanimous mind. We are together with all beings. And what about Rōshin, or parental mind, or nurturing mind? The second one is how we work together with all other individual beings within this network. And what Uchiyama Rōshi is talking about, each one of us bloom our own flowers. In doing so, the flower, in the end of the second paragraph, he uses about universal life. And in this case, spring is a metaphor of universal life. When spring comes, spring is time, winter, spring, summer, and fall. In this time, here and now, we bloom as whether a violet or dandelion or milk vetch. By blooming our flower, our own unique flowers, we help others also. Like the bacteria and being family plants or fern flowers bloom, butterfly or bee or honeybees come. Actually, this milk vetch is a good source of bee honey. Anyway, so not only the plant and the bacteria on the root, but milk vetch and farmers are also, supporting each other. And milk vetch and bees and other insects also supporting each other. So even though there is a competition and winner and losers relation within this network, we can also see the helping and supporting each other. Without helping and supporting each other, there's no spring. So it's important to bloom our own flowers, and if possible to support other people or other living beings to bloom their own flowers. That, according to Uchiyama Rōshi, that is what nurturing mind. So it's not mean we can control this entire network and to make the condition of this network completely healthy and peaceful. But by blooming our own tiny flowers like a violet, that is already helping others. That is the relation between each and every flowers and the spring. And when we use this universal life, what Uchiyama Rōshi wrote is Jin issai no seimei. Seimei is life, and Jin is whole or entire, and issai is all beings. So all living beings are living this universal life individually. So each one of us is unique being. So we have to bloom our unique flowers. But in doing so, we can help others without competition, or even with competition. That is the way, as a bodhisattva, to see this entire network as Buddha, as Dharma, as Sangha. That is the kind of actual meaning of 4 bodhisattva vows. Being numberless, we vow to free them or save them. There's no way, we are really tiny part of this network. There's no way we can save all beings within this network. But when we awaken to this reality in which we are supporting each other, then because of this awakening or awareness, we cannot harm others in order to some kind of benefit or profit to me only. At least we wish not being harmful to others. That is the meaning of Bodhisattva vows. Well, I think that's all I have to say. 11 o'clock. Any question or comments? So I apologize for our mistakes. Please.
Just thought I'd mention, so vetch is used in the same way in Western agriculture traditionally.
The same plant?
Not the same exact plant, but very closely related plant.
Oh.
And it's planted in the fall,
Uh-huh.
often with winter wheat.
Mm.
And it's also a sort of symbiosis. So the winter wheat, creates like kind of a pole,
Mm.
and then the vetch will grow up
Oh.
the wheat.
Mm.
And the vetch, provides the nutrients,
Mm.
and the wheat is mostly just kind of providing that post.
Mm.
But also it has very deep roots,
Mm.
so it can bring some nutrients from like very deep in the soil, where the vetch has kind of shallow roots. And then also in the spring, in the same way, after they flower,
Mm.
they turn it into the soil. So it's the same system here.
That's interesting.
But no one uses it anymore because now we just use chemicals.
Yeah, in Japan too.
But I was going to say that you talked about this differentiation between the King's Dharma and Buddha Dharma. And one of the things that I really like about Uchiyama Rōshi is I think he was really committed to keeping the Buddha Dharma as the Buddha Dharma.
Mm.
And you mentioned how when he had sesshin, he would just ask that people bring a cup of rice for
Yeah.
each meal.
Yeah.
And I remember reading, like the floor, I think, broke at Antaiji while he was practicing, and he used like an orange crate to prop the floor back up.
Yeah.
'Cause for
That
him
was shortly after World War II.
Mhm.
So they had no money.
So I think Buddhism in the U.S. I think there's as Americans we have this very like maybe capitalist kind of mindset,
Mm.
and I think sometimes it finds its way into our Buddhist practice and the way that temples here are run. So I wonder if you have anything to say about that, how maybe we should be careful, or what a good balance is, or something like that.
Probably one of the reasons I choose Bloomington, Indiana, as a location of my Sangha is, in here, this center, this temple cannot be large institution. So I think it can be very healthy place. People, for example, if my temple is in California, I think many Japanese people come as a sightseer. They are not particularly interested in practice, but no Japanese come to Bloomington for sightseeing. So, when I worked at a big Japanese American temple in California, when the priests in higher rank visited their temple, those priests in that temple need to take care of those high rank priests when they do shopping souvenir or meals for at a restaurant. They are like a servant. So I wanted to escape from that kind of environment. So I think if this temple or our practice and teaching survive in Indiana or in this part of United States, then we can be survived in any places in this country. So I have no desire to make this center or temple as a big institute, but keep it small. And if people likes our style of study and practice, then they can make their own small center in somewhere else. So I think it's kind of healthy to have independent small sanghas instead of making this big one center as a big institution in long run. I think this is kind of important point to keep our practice and studying in a kind of healthy way and independent from this, what is the word, King's Dharma, or political power, political and economical power. Okay, anything else? Please.
I took my precepts at Mount Shasta,
Oh,
California,
I see.
and I was talking to my teacher there,
Mm.
and I said, because I moved here in June,
Mm.
and I said, they don't have a lot of ceremonies like we do at Mount Shasta.
Mm.
And she said, think of life as a ceremony. Think of your life as a ceremony.
Mm.
And so when I see this,
Mm.
I think it is a ceremony. It is.
What you mean is living in this way is like a ceremony?
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, yes. And so we don't need a big ceremony within Sangha. Our life, in our daily lives itself, can be ceremonious.
Would you like to say something about why our ceremonies are very simple?
Because I don't like
And
I
know
don't
you
like
also-
big complicated ceremony.
I know you also have a teaching under that. This might be a nice time.
And my teacher also didn't like it. Actually, Symbiosis Rōshi could do everything. He was a very kind of a classic traditional Zen master. But when Uchiyama Rōshi became Symbiosis Rōshi's disciple, he was about 30 years old. He was already grown up, and he didn't like ceremonies. So he practiced only with Symbiosis Rōshi. He never practiced at any traditional Japanese monasteries. So even he liked the ceremonies, he didn't know how to do it. So for Uchiyama Rōshi, the essence of Symbiosis Rōshi's teaching and practice is just sitting. So he really want to focus on just sitting and what's the meaning of this just sitting in our daily lives, in this modern life. So Uchiyama Rōshi was not interested in traditional monastic, ceremonial or formal practice. I don't know if it's good or not. So Uchiyama Rōshi was called an outsider of Sotoshu. And he didn't ask us to be the same. So he said, just bloom your flower. So one of my Dharma brothers, became a teacher at a traditional monastery, and that's fine. And I was sent to this country, so and I didn't like the ceremony neither. So I need to create my own style of practice, and this is a kind of a natural way I bloom my flower. So I don't want to criticize traditional Japanese monastic practice because I don't know. Actually, I practice at the monastery only 6 months, so I really don't know. So it's not a, how can I say? There's no, how can I say, big meanings. Okay?
Well, you and I have been talking about this, so I thought this is a good time to explain to others, your emphasis on keeping our ceremonies and our forms simple so that we don't lose that connection with Zazen, so that we understand why we're doing what we're doing, and we're not just doing things because that's the way they're done in a formal situation, that we are very intentional about the forms that we use because we're trying to keep the meaning and spirit and not lose connection with Shikantara.
Yeah, and another point I think is, our forms, how we do things, how do we behave, should be expression of our personality. In Japanese restaurant, even fast food restaurant, the employees are trained in very polite way. So even you go to a McDonald's, the employees speak very politely and behave very politely. But I see that was not their personality. How they speak must be really different from how they speak with other people outside of out of the restaurant. So in a sense, their personality and their daily behavior and what they do when they are in their work, it's kind of a separate thing. And I see in Japanese monastery, some priests, some training monks behave or perform the ceremonies really beautifully, but when they are not in that stage, their personality are very different. So it seems their personality and their behavior is kind of a separate. So it seems their formal practice is like actors doing zazen on the stage as a part of the theater. And I was just sitting in the zendo. It's a kind of how can I say, performance. Not it doesn't need to be expression of their personality. But what I want to avoid is if we make the forms and ceremonies too big and complicated, somehow our personality and daily behavior and what we do within such a kind of a stage become separate, two different things. I think we should avoid that. Okay, please.
Sorry to add one more. Then what is the original intention of ceremonies, do you think?
Intention of ceremony?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not the right person to answer. When you go back to Japan, ask the priest there. Because if I say something, it has some kind of a poison. Okay. Okay, thank you very much.